quorum being in the vicinity, I'd like to call this meeting of the Urbana Committee of the Whole to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mr. Ammons.
Here.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Jacobson.
Here.
Mr. Madigan.
Here.
Ms. Marlin.
Here.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe.
Here.
Mayor Pressing.
Here.
Now we are to additions to the agenda and staff report. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Mr. Smythe, could you take the chair? Because I'd like
Sure.
to suggest.
Eric?
I think that we should begin a discussion of the traffic stop task force study. And I would like to suggest that an item included in that study to be put on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight. And that is, it was mentioned in the report in passing, but then suggested the council should consider, and that is the racial disparity in marijuana arrests and citations. And I guess we need 2 council members to put on the agenda. It looks as though Mr. Smythe is nodding his head. Yeah, Mr. Well, okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I see several heads. I think all those in favor, just informally, yeah, okay, we've got the count there, yeah.
Okay, so Madam Clerk, could you put that on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight? Okay.
I'll turn it
Okay,
back
I'll
over to you.
resume the chair. Okay, and if there are no other additions to the agenda, I think we'll have from the Finance Department annual financial report presentation.
So I am very pleased to be here this year at the beginning of January rather than, I think it was May or June last year. So I think that shows you that we've made some tremendous progress on catching up on the backlog. We were able to get that done because of a lot of hard work from city staff, particularly the woman to my right, who is Sophie Pham, who is our city accountant, and I know that many of you have not had the opportunity to meet her, but I think without her help we would not have been able to make that progress, so I want to recognize her for that. I also want to share a few thoughts about some of the audit findings. Those of you who have dug into the materials probably noticed that some of the same findings from last year reappear. In part, that's because we didn't complete the fiscal 14 audit until nearly the end of FY15, and so there was not adequate time to address all of those concerns. In my opinion, we've addressed most of those at this point, and I think we're on the right path. One exception is probably some of the concerns about IT issues, and some of those can't be addressed until we implement a new financial management system. We're working hard on that. IT staff is planning to release an RFP for that this month, and that will go along with some technology improvements in community development and public works. I think that transition will be very challenging. The last time I did this was about 20 years ago now, and I remember it being a very intensive long-term effort, but we're prepared for that, and the results will be well worth it. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Mike Malott, who's a manager with our audit firm Baker Tilly, and he will talk about the audit.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight to present this year's audit to you. I'm going to try to not echo everything Elizabeth just said because she stole my thunder. I do want to thank both Elizabeth and Sophie. Taking from obviously presenting in June last year in what was a very difficult audit to, frankly, almost a pristinely smooth audit this year and issuing before all the initial deadlines is a wonder. I think we were talking, or we set our goals to issuing before year end with the idea that probably it might not necessarily happen, given there was a lot to catch up on. The fact that we were ready to issue before the year end is marvelous. They have a number of clients over the last few years where they have come from a bit of a backlog to catch up, and it's usually a multi-year process. To up the issuance date about 6 months is huge, and really I want to thank them for all the hard work, because that's really why it gets done. Is, you know, without all the effort and work they did for us, we can't come in and disrupt their day for a couple weeks and make it a little extra difficult on them. So I really want to thank them for all the hard work they've done this year. So with that, in terms of speaking with the audit, what we do, obviously, is we present the financial statements, and we help prepare those, and we review the numbers and look into that. This year, the city will be submitting it for the GFOA award, which is, you know, for putting up a comprehensive financial report. Last year, we were unable to do so due to the timing, but this year, back on track, and it's a much prettier binder and everything as well. But it's a more comprehensive, a little more information. We had most things last year, even though we didn't submit, or the city did not submit for the award, but a little added information here, particularly in the front sections, to provide context to the numbers and what has gone on in the city during the fiscal year under audit. In addition to the financial statements, we did continued the walkthroughs of controls. We looked at processes again this year. As Elizabeth mentioned, the findings in the communication letter are very similar to last year, and that is due to the timing of when, you know, we provided the final findings from last year's audit. And unfortunately, the scope of what that letter is for fiscal year 15. So although, you know, we've been able to incorporate management responses to kind of get a better picture of where the city is now, which is amazingly far along. Most of the findings that have been provided have either been in the process of being resolved or have been fully resolved going forward. And we expect the size and the number of comments next year to be much smaller. Again, as Elizabeth mentioned, there are some things that will probably continue to be presented until the software implementation takes place, if it does, when it does. Yeah, because there are some limitations related to that until that time will probably be more minor comments, because there are only so much you can do in certain situations, and the comments will reflect as such. You know, within that letter as well, we also provided some information, you know, some of the new standards that come out. If you really want to get a good night's rest, you can look at the one-pager we have there and fall asleep pretty quickly. There's a lot coming in the next couple of years. Hopefully not as significant as one of the changes that had to happen this year, but each year, probably the next 4 or 5 years, you'll see some minor tweaks and changes to the note disclosures and the information presented, and that's due to our governing body of what we need to do, being very busy. There's also some other communications related to kind of general how the audit went, our responsibilities, managed responsibilities, those charges of governance. Your responsibilities is technically we work for you. The idea that, you know, there's an open line of communication. If you have ever concerns, questions, comments, please always let us know. Although we work with Elizabeth and Sophie on the day-to-day basis, we really work for you. So every year I want to just kind of put that out there and let you know that, you know, we're at your whim, if you will. If there's anything concerns or questions, please just let us know. We're always available. We also did some work around federal expenditures. We're in the process of issuing that. That has a little bit of a longer deadline than the financial audit. That's going to be finalized, if not this week, hopefully next week, because my partner is out on paternity leave. So, but that's pretty much done. And that, again, the fact that we're getting all these pieces, and that's the final piece of the puzzle this year, is pretty incredible again. So what we do is we pick a certain number of the federal funding that you get. We take a deep dive into it, make sure in compliance, the procedures around that are good. We also looked at expenditures incurred related to the TIF areas to make sure they're in compliance with state laws and provide an opinion related to that. And finally, in terms of the reports we issue, we did issue standalone pension reports for both the police and fire pensions as well. Now that information is incorporated in the CAFR here, the financial statements here, but separate reports were also issued related to that. Really, with the letter, again, as I said, the improvement's been drastic. I think you can just look at, you know, Elizabeth's responses, and that's probably where the better information comes from, to be honest, because by the time we did our testing around things, the findings we had related to the fiscal year, they already resolved. And unfortunately, again, we have to communicate those, so I don't want to see it as a matter of concern. I just want to reiterate that because there has been massive progress in that regard. And I know last year was a bit of an eye-opener, and I want to let you know that the steps taken. There's only so much time to incorporate everything, but the steps already taken have been impressive. And I know Elizabeth and I have conversations pretty regularly on ways to continue to improve the controls at the city and safeguard your operations and your processes. The one final thing I want to say, if you were to dig into the CAFR, there are some changes this year and related to how pensions are reported. In the past, there was what was called a net pension asset. Basically, you're told every year how much you're required to fund IMRF, police, and fire pensions by actuaries, and then you fund a certain amount. That cumulative effect of that kind of actual versus prescribed amount was what went on your financial statements on that first set of consolidated statements. And then in the back, there was a secondary schedule that, frankly, most people ignored. That was the overall health of the plan itself, and that was the accumulation of investments and assets over the years and where it stands as of that date, and then also kind of a projection of the overall liability, the amount to be paid out in benefits over the next 100 years, and then kind of mathematically calculated to be what that value was as of today. That information was always just a little kind of footnote in the back. Now that's been brought to the forefront and it's placed on your financial statements. So you'll notice that there was a much larger liability placed on those entity-wide financial statements. That is new this year, so we're changing the audit standards. Frankly, it's been, I always want to make sure you're aware because it is an eye-opener for everybody, because it is a big number that goes on the books. Pensions are obviously a large piece of the pie in the puzzle for every municipality. That's been kind of brought from just being some kind of back information to being in the numbers on the statements, and also some really beefed up disclosures on the health of each individual plan and where each municipality is with funding, how the numbers are calculated, and there's some other complicated stuff that was supposed to make it clearer and frankly didn't. That's in there as well due to certain timing issues. But that is a pretty drastic change. So if you compare last year to this year, you're going to see that. And that's really just the reflection of a new audit standard. Hopefully, although there are changes coming the next couple of years, this is the biggest one for a while. Eventually, the post-deployment plans will be part of that as well. And but other than that, that's really kind of the big change this year. I'm not going to get into any more numbers. Everything's in front of you. But if you do have any questions, please feel free.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Diane.
Well, to say last year's audit was an eye-opener is a drastic understatement. But so I want to thank again Elizabeth and Sophie for your incredibly hard work over this year. So, and I understand the timing and everything behind this. Obviously, the concerns last year, a lot of them focused on segregations of duties and having a double set of eyes on things, and as well as the vulnerability of our very customized software management system that we're operating under, and it's still, that's a source for concern. So when we get our new software management system, will that, I know we've addressed segregation of duties in a kind of in a proactive way, but will that management system sort of automatically ensure that those practices continue? And obviously it'll address the IT end of things as well.
Well, I'm going to say with the new financial management system, things will be more automated, but maintaining appropriate segregation of duties requires human intervention and oversight.
Okay.
So, yes, it will help, but that's not all of it.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Perhaps jaw dropper is the more appropriate facial metaphor.
Very
But
much.
anyway, are there any other comments or questions? Yes, Mayor Preston.
Well, one of the problems is that we have a lot of duplication of effort that is not segregation of duties, is just plain old inefficiency. And so that's one of the reasons I've been really pushing to get a new accounting system. It's very hard for me to get information out of the current one. So we're looking for something that's going to make things much clearer to everyone.
Yeah, and that is absolutely accurate. There are many things that take much longer than they should, or where we're doing redundant data entry. And so really a lot of this is going to be an efficiency improvement. For example, you are currently getting financial reports, but you're getting them, you're getting monthly detail of expenditures, but quarterly you're now getting a financial statement, which you weren't previously. I would like that to be monthly if we had a system where we could really design a report and then automate it, so it was just a matter of making sure that the data was updated and pushing a button to spit out the report. But unfortunately, it's much more complicated than that. So the mayor's exactly right.
Other questions? Yes.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Mike.
Mike. So you said that when you guys do the audit, you just take a section of the finances and just dig deep into that and then come up with your findings, or do you actually audit everything?
So in terms of kind of the findings here in the communication letter, we kind of do an assessment of all of the process. We look at everything and say, what are the major processes where the highest volume, largest dollar value. We don't look at everything because that would take us an eternity to do. Unfortunately, it's comprehensive but not all-inclusive, I think is kind of the best way to describe it. So we look at cash disbursements, payroll, the close processes every month, certain revenue cycles that are hidden. And that does change slightly from year to year based upon operations. We also do some more high-level entity-wide type things, IT assessments, kind of general management processes related to the finance side, and that's where we develop our findings. Also, during the course of the audit, if we do see things that pop out in processes, the actual testing of the numbers, in the data we receive and the support we look at, if something comes up in that regard, that also gets incorporated as well. So it's kind of a mix of looking at the big things and focusing on those and really diving into it, and then over the course of the audit, anything we see, even if it's just a matter of a recommendation, hey, this might be a better way to do things, even if it's not a major risk area, but maybe a best practice. We also want to provide, whether it be in the letter or even informally as well.
I'm sorry. So somewhere in here, I've highlighted quite a bit. It's quite educational, but you said that I'm trying to find it here. I'll find it and come back to my question. It was for you, Elizabeth. So
Okay, Dennis, in the meantime.
And I just wanted to comment on what I perceive as improved practice generally in the financial department. I'll say that for the balances of the funds in the Sister City account that I have to understand and watch for the Sister City committee here in the city, when we would ask for a summary, it was often pretty vague, or it looked like it was being pulled sort of from random sources. And currently, I've been able to get a very detailed accounting of expenditures and receipts in a one-page, very compressed and understandable manner. And I appreciate that so much as just one of the people who must pull data from the system and track it occasionally. I just appreciate that improvement just very much.
Okay.
one of my questions was in relationship to the understanding the different funds that we have. So that's a lot of them. When you say the city is healthy, or when you start to look at the financial situation or the outlook for the city of Urbana, your conclusion, I guess either of you could answer this, is that there was an increase in revenue for us for this year. So what is your overall outlook or a feeling about our financial situation? Especially, I guess we got to give some kudos to the mayor for her having the spunk and the fight to fight Carl, right? I guess I can give you a hand clap on it and publicly, but to fight that, because I'm sure that makes a tremendous difference. So if you would, just an overview of what you're thinking about the outlook for us financially at this point.
Well, So as part of the budget process, I will prepare a 5-year financial forecast, primarily focused on the general operating fund. And so really what's more important to me from a planning perspective than where we ended last year is where we are going over the next 5 years so that we can make strategic decisions about providing city services within the context of what we expect the picture to look like. But you did mention, you know, there are a lot of funds. Yes, there are a lot of funds. That's government accounting for you. But generally, the focus when we talk about the city's financial health is on the general operating fund, because that provides most basic city services: police, fire, most of public works, basically anything that doesn't have a specific funding source. And most of those other funds have a designated purpose, and generally they have a source of revenue that sustains them. So did that answer your question?
Well, it gives me a good idea of which fund to focus on the most, right? You know,
General
and-
fund, definitely.
and I kind of saw that as it made sense, but I was trying to follow how which one to look at to really get a good grasp on where we are, and if we wanted to do particular things, where we are with being able to do those things as a council. So I can make an appointment and come and sit down with you at some other time for a better understanding.
Well, right, and we will be talking about that financial forecast fairly soon. So
Not
that's
surprisingly, the
really-
mayor wishes to share a perspective.
Yeah, we've been kind of under a cloud for quite a while since the recession, and then we had this Carl problem. But we kept our operations going, and we had to starve our capital and our vehicle and equipment replacement. So when we get some of this money back, that's where we really have a deficit at this point, because we put the money into providing services, but you can't neglect equipment and buildings forever. You have to pay attention to them.
And streets.
Well, yeah, all the basic infrastructure, that's what really, we have a huge deficit, so we're not just going to be rolling in money. We have unmet needs that we have deliberately set aside just to keep the services going.
Ms. Marlin.
Well, and I see this as us now being at the juncture where we really need to do the programming needs assessment and facilities plan so that we can plan for the future. Unless we know where we're going, we can't figure out how to get there. So I really hope we can include that in our budget for this year.
Not a surprising comment, but well taken. Anything? Yes, Mr. Spivey.
Yeah, okay, and so to echo that, again, thank you, both of you, and Mike, for your guidance as well, and getting us to this point. Yeah, we could potentially be in a much better financial position at this time next year. I assume our financial picture is still not clear because things are still not resolved, but so that's going to be part of the timing of this. Your 5-year planning or whatever, I assume, is going to take this into account. You're going to come back with several scenarios then, or how are you going to handle the still somewhat uncertain?
Yeah, I think we will develop. Last year was pretty rushed because I started late November and we were behind on the audit. But I think we'll look at several scenarios. And there's a lot of uncertainty with the state budget situation still. They have, I believe, caught up on all the payments they owe us at this point, but without a budget, it's hard to say what comes next.
Yeah, okay, so I guess the three things out there are, you know, we don't have the financial package yet. That's in the works. We still have some court cases to settle, and then we have, you know, these unmet needs. When should we start? I mean, I guess at some point we've got to start thinking about our facilities and our infrastructure. So I think doing it as part of this year's budget process probably makes sense. And we're going to start the budget process March, April. Do you have a rough idea when we're going to start We're gonna a little earlier start this year, maybe?
Well, I'm hoping we'll have the forecast complete sometime in February, and then we'll roll right into the budget.
Yes,
I
Mr.
found
Ennis.
my stuff here that I was looking for. So in one of the sections, it says that the flash index for us was that we, as of October 2015, that the unemployment rate dropped by 5.1% in October. How do we determine those numbers?
Well, the unemployment information we would get from the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics. The flash index is provided by the Institute of Government and Public Affairs at the University of Illinois.
So this is not a Urbana number.
I'd have to look at my notes, but they do provide that information at a fairly detailed level. I don't recall if it was Champaign-Urbana or just Urbana. But.
Yeah, but I'm saying what's here, the 5.1% unemployment drop that was listed is not necessarily in relationship to Urbana. It's on page 4, the opening, one of the opening pages there, under the local economy. I guess they were high points or different. You see it?
Yes, right. So local unemployment rate would be Champaign-Urbana metropolitan area. They don't have figures as detailed as just the city of Urbana.
Okay. And one of the things under the building out of the fiber network by ITV3, there was a question that was raised to me about this, and maybe I'll just set up a time to come and talk to you about it because I need to get a better understanding of it, but some of the money that was generated for it came from property owners who used the service, right? And that money, from my understanding, was supposed to be accessible to the community, especially to those who had created that pool, almost kind of like a TIF, if you will, of some sort. And so there were some questions about access to that and how that money has been used, but that would be more for ITV3 or something. Oh, I'm sorry. Want me to call on you? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so I think Mr. Smythe is the expert on this point.
Actually, I think you're referring to the Community Benefit Fund.
Yes.
Yeah, that is under development, and hopefully there'll be some movement within the next few months from the board. The UCTV board is meeting twice a month to work out, and different subcommittees are meeting and trying to put together a vision, vision position, and there's a group meeting on the Community Development Fund to be putting together some proposals. Should have more after our next two board meetings to
Okay.
report on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you'll get a report from me on it.
All right.
Okay. Other, yes?
Just one more
Mr.
question. Is there a policy in the city of Urbana somewhere that states a guideline for what we consider to be a reasonable amount of debt versus what would approach a risky amount, or where would that be found?
Well, I would say if we had one, we'd be very far from it because we have very little debt.
Right.
But
yeah.
if there is a policy like that, I have not seen it, and that's
Okay.
one of the things that we need to be working on is comprehensive financial
Yeah, 'cause
policies.
for so long we had none, and now we have
Yeah.
some, which is
Yeah.
small. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious what.
So when we look at the financial forecast this year, I'll probably suggest some general ones in relation to the budget, but then I think what'll happen is over time, we'll build on those policies and make them more detailed and
'Cause
comprehensive.
that would be useful looking ahead. We've got some big projects on the horizon, so I'm thinking. Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much.
I'm
Oh,
sorry. There was one.
Yes.
In relationship to the point that Diane has made about from no debt to some, when did that happen? The
city issued bonds in 2012 for the Boneyard Creek and 2014 for Windsor Road. And really, that is basically the only significant debt that the city has. It's a
in
very,
2012 was when this Carl situation also started. 2013.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, with one of the statements you had in here, it said that the that we had 3% of the region's population, but we absorbed 83% of the tax loss, and I was wondering if that contributed to the debt at all or something like that.
I don't know that it did directly. The Boneyard Creek bonds are being repaid from one of the TIF districts, and so I think that was just a mechanism to upfront the money that would come from the TIF over time.
Okay, all right.
Charlie, did you?
Eric.
Yeah, actually, the debt thing raises an interesting point to me, because it seems to me, I mean, I can understand two scenarios, two extreme scenarios. A community that was small but growing very fast probably should borrow a lot to build infrastructure to keep up with the growing population, whereas a community that was like completely, I don't know, completely mature might not have, you know, with a stable population, might not have so much debt. So I wonder if there are academic or practical studies that relate the appropriate debt levels to the rate of growth or other particularities in a you know, of a community.
If there are, I have not seen that, but that's something I would research before we talk about a debt policy. Generally, the policies I've seen, it's expressed, you know, as a percentage of EAV or something like that. In fact, I think for non-home rule municipalities in Illinois, I think there is a legal debt limit, which is like 6 or 8% of equalized assessed valuation.
Yeah, but it can't be that simple or straightforward, because if you imagine the case, for example, of a community that is growing very fast, but they've got to build some infrastructure to take, you know, to be able to take advantage of the growth, then they ought to borrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, as the city's decision makers, I would expect to inform you of anything that you should consider, and then you would weigh other
Right.
factors that would go into that decision.
Okay. Okay, I'll take it back. Okay, now, unless there is any more comment or question, I'll again express gratitude for your report. Thank you. Now, we also have a presentation from, and I don't know the appropriate title, Mr. or Doctor, or what's correct? Mr. Doctor. Herr Doctor Professor Jeffrey Woods, Director of Center of Health, Aging, and Disability at University of Illinois.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mayor Pressing, for inviting me here tonight. So I'm going to click on this presentation up here, and if the council members want to turn their chairs or just go ahead and listen. I don't know if you can see it. Oh, you've got a hidden screen? Okay, great. So my name's Jeff Woods. I'm a longtime professor at the university in the Department of Kinesiology and Community Health. I'm also very recently, in the last couple of years, been appointed the director of the Center on Health, Aging, and Disability. My goal here tonight is to gather enthusiasm and support from the city of Urbana for an effort that I'll briefly describe tonight regarding the evaluation and potential improvements in various quality of life domains important to older adults in our community. This effort was not my idea. It's been brought forth to me by people living in the community, including, among others, Kathleen Holden, who is here tonight, and I'll point her out right here, and other community stakeholders who have interests in the health and well-being of older adults in the community, one being Deb Reardon, CEO of Clark Lindsay Village, who's also in attendance here tonight, and both are very supportive of this effort and have helped so far with its initial plannings. Last month, Kathleen and I discussed this topic with Mayor Pressing, and the mayor suggested that I present it to you, the City Council, to solicit your support and enthusiasm, hopefully, for this eventual effort that I'll explain. First, let me say that by initiating this effort, I don't mean to imply that Urbana is not age-friendly and not livable. Indeed, I'll present a tool that the AARP has provided us online, whereby I actually entered Urbana into the database, and it comes up with a livability index, and the index is quite favorable for Urbana. But if Urbana follows worldwide trends, the number of older adults living here is likely to increase significantly in the future. And if we don't prepare for it now, we might get caught behind the times and have some significant issues. In other words, what I'm saying is that all communities can improve their age friendliness, Urbana as well. And so just a little bit about my Center on Health, Aging, and Disability. Our mission is to foster interdisciplinary research, education, and outreach that promotes health and wellness, healthy aging across the lifespan, healthy communities, and optimal participation of individuals with disabilities. So clearly an effort regarding age-friendly for Urbana fits within our mission. You can see some other information there about contact information. Most of you are probably well aware of the significant demographic shift that's occurring in our country and really around the world with respect to a silver tsunami or a graying of America. In that, if you can see on this graph, starting a few years back, there's been a kind of a change in the slope of the number of older adults living in America that are 65 years of age and older. In addition, the oldest old are getting increased in terms of their population demographic, people who are 85 years and older, and this certainly has significant impact on the decisions we make today and moving forward. So our goals here are really to help Urbana be a more age-friendly, livable place. Again, not to say that it's not already, but I think every community can improve. We're also wanting to achieve the status as an age-friendly city in the eyes of the World Health Organization and the AARP. They actually put forth a process, which is a process that we'll have to apply for and go through in order to attain this age-friendly status. Right now, there's only one other community in Illinois that's entered the network of age-friendly communities, and that is Evanston, Illinois. I have some contacts up there that I've talked to about this process. And it's obviously important to older adults, and not just older adults, but all who live in the community, because some of the age-friendly domains also impact people of all ages. But the question that I'll pose quickly to you is, why is the University of Illinois interested in this, and why is my Center of Health, Aging, and Disability interested in this? And without belaboring the point, we need to demonstrate to our state government our local impact, and this is one way in which we can do so. We're a land-grant university. Service is in our DNA. Selfishly, we have the potential to address important research questions by interacting with community stakeholders and older adults in our community regarding hot topic areas like technology and health and aging, and possibly the establishment of a living laboratory whereby we can work with community stakeholders, city governments, and older adults in our community to address questions and improve quality of life. There's opportunities for our students that I can see down the road, both undergrad and graduate students. And of course, we want to attract high-quality faculty, keep them in the community long after retirement, and learn from our older generation. So my center has the capacity to coordinate and communicate to all stakeholders. We have experience accessing resources. That's what we do as faculty members, access grants, try to get grant dollars to answer important questions and solve public health problems. And we have topical expertise in the 8 areas that I'll talk about in a second that the age-friendly effort focuses on. And of course, every effort needs a leader, and so with the support of some of the community, we've stepped up to try to take a leadership role here. So how can becoming age-friendly impact Urbana? Well, certainly in terms of economic development, in terms of improvement of quality of life for all residents, not just older adults, with respect to jobs, shopping, health care, recreation, volunteerism, transportation. We'll talk about those in a second. Connecting home, family, and community through communication and participation. I think my center can do a good job in that regard, and I'll mention a symposium at the end of my talk here where we're going to start this up in April. Improved housing, transportation. So the domains of age-friendly typically are housing, transportation, environment, safety, participation, coordination, communication, health, and community support. So if you look at the World Health Organization and AARP's age-friendly domains here on this slide, you can see that age-friendly cities typically address transportation needs, housing needs, social participation, with respect and social inclusion, with civic participation and employment, communication and information, community support and health services, and also address issues related to outdoor spaces and buildings, infrastructure issues. Now, each community's age-friendly effort can be tailored to the strengths and weaknesses of that community. So these topics are flexible. They can be combined, separated, added to, depending on the evaluation that takes place in the initial stages of the effort. So this program was established in 2007 by the World Health Organization. AARP is the U.S. sponsor for the effort, and all applications go through AARP and then to the World Health Organization. My center has already made connections with AARP and other age-friendly communities, and we can draw from their experiences, good and bad. And so in this effort, we will not be alone. We will have the support of AARP as well as the communities that are going through the age-friendly process right now that I've contacted. So AARP's Public Policy Institute has a neat tool called the Livability Index. You can see the URL there on the upper left, aarp.org/livability index. And really this index is a tool based upon focus groups from older adults that they've conducted, data gathering from communities. The range of score is from 0 to 100. It's really a relative measure to compare communities. A score of 50 is average. The highest score I think that's been realized is a score in the low 70s, and I can't remember which community that was. It's not a perfect tool because it depends on data that's provided by communities or gathered from communities, but it certainly is a tool that can be used for evaluation and planning of age-friendly efforts around the domains. And so I took the liberty of entering Urbana into the age-friendly index, and here's the report that came out. You can see that with the score of 50 being average, Urbana scored 58, which I think is good. You can see how it broke down with respect to the domains. Transportation, Urbana scores very high. Also way above average in environment, neighborhood, housing, health, and then engagement and opportunity a bit lower, but still above average. Just to put this in perspective, because I know Mayor Pressing wanted to know what Champaign's score was, and Urbana beat Champaign by 1 point. I don't have the exact breakdown relative to the different domains, but both communities are pretty livable, fairly age-friendly, but that's not to say that we can't improve our age-friendliness and livability in any one community. So in general, the next steps to become age-friendly and livable across the 8 domains is we need to involve all stakeholders, and that's why I'm here tonight. Having the support and enthusiasm of the mayor and the city council is very important to the effort, not just at the beginning, but also down the road if there's any recommendations being brought forth. Who else is going to carry out some of these things except the city council? There's others that need to be involved as well. You can see some of them listed there. Basically, we will perform a survey of the current needs of the community from the perspective of older persons, so focus groups and interviews of older adults living in the community. Some of these data may already have been gathered. We've talked to several stakeholders, and they've collected some information on this, so we may not need to do a whole lot of data gathering, but certainly we will if we have to. We will identify areas of strength and communicate them. That's kind of the low-hanging fruit. So if older adults don't know about activities or things, that's important to let them know. And that would be fairly easy to do, certainly from the standpoint of where I sit. Identifying areas of weakness is also in the plan, and also trying to devise ways to improve them. That's the harder part, and that's where we would need to engage the stakeholders, including the city. This plan is an iterative process. It's not just a one and done, so it's a cycle, as I'll show in a graph here in a second. It's over a 5-year period, and then it continues in forever, really. But the plan does need to be submitted to the World Health Organization with a sponsorship along a timeline. So they've set up a process, which is very nice because you have to hold yourself to deadlines and outputs, which is good because it keeps things moving along. And so to briefly look at the plan, if we start here in terms of evaluation, so once we have identified the stakeholders, we start the evaluation process. At some point, which I hope will be this summer, we can formally enter the network. There's a brief application that needs to be filled out, along with a letter from the mayor supporting the effort. And then over the course of a couple years with the stakeholders and with the older adults in the community, we kind of set forth the plan, try to figure out what the strengths and weaknesses are, and then we implement those plans in the latter years of the 5-year cycle, and then step 4 is continuous improvement beyond 5 years. And so this is a long-term plan. I can say that as long as I am the center director, Chad, I will be involved in this, and I certainly will promote this from the standpoint of our university. Just in a little bit more detail, and I don't want to go into too much here, there's certainly milestones and things that need to happen. We are at the very early stage here, and so I think it's important to gather enthusiasm and support from the city government, obtain political commitment from the mayor, and then enter this thing together so that we can then do the best to improve the quality of life for older adults living in Urbana. With that, I will take any questions or comments, and I do want to formally invite all of you to attend our Chittenden Symposium on Health, Technology, and Aging and Age-Friendly Urbana-Champaign. It's going to be April 26th, all day, really. In the morning, it'll be more research-based, which is what we do at the university. In the afternoon, it'll be more about the community effort and the outreach. It's going to be at the iHotel. If you want to register, please contact Penny and I, myself, or you can call that number there. You can see why you should attend, to learn about the latest in health, technology, and aging, to learn about age-friendly efforts. We'll have some speakers at the symposium from other communities that are going through this effort, so we can learn from them about best practices and also, potential problems and pitfalls. And so with that, again, I thank Mayor Pressing and I thank the council for your attention, and if you have any questions, I will take them.
Mayor Pressing.
Well, thank you very much. I want to ask you about Evanston. Are they connected with Northwestern on a research project like you have?
So no, they're not. I think at one point Northwestern was involved, but I think due to some wants of Northwestern financially that they ended up doing it, the city did it themselves. Okay. There's a woman named Christina Ferraro who actually was there. She's now left, but there's 2 people who are going to come down here in April to talk about the Evanston experience, I guess, from the standpoint of age-friendly.
Okay, thank you.
Aaron.
So thanks a lot for the presentation. I hope to grow to about 115 around here. So
that's the plan.
Well, so let's just cut to the chase. So how do you determine these particular scores? I'm coming from a perspective of an African-American community where we're running into high blood pressure, all these other different things that are silent killers and stress and all that type of stuff. And some of the indicators show that in the state of Illinois, where African-Americans by and large have a median income of $11,000, Latinos $13,000, and white counterparts at $140,000. So how are you factoring that into livability for all ethnicities?
So this whole effort is about social inclusion and participation, and there are metrics. I apologize, I don't know the exact metrics. I do know I could invite Rodney Harrell, who is the AARP public health policy person who spearheaded the actual algorithms and things to come up with these, like a 1-number score, which it's hard to think how that was done, but it's not a perfect tool. But the whole point is to improve social participation, inclusion, all that stuff. I mean, and then try to track it, right?
Which is our lowest score,
from the
right?
standpoint of older adults, exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
which is our lowest score on the whole spectrum.
Yeah, right.
So how does that factor in for like employment at the university and things like that? Do you all work with different departments to show and to check and see what those numbers are as far as across all ethnicities and things like that, as far as inclusion? Because that's one of the major...
We don't use this particular tool. I mean, every researcher has their own research area that they focus on. And what my goal is as a leader of this effort is to bring to bear the expertise of the university researchers to try to help the community of Urbana improve the quality of life for older adults. And so it's incumbent upon me to try to get together the stakeholders, including the researchers at the university, and convince them that this is a really good thing to do. And I think many of them who work in public health, which is one of the departments in our college of applied health sciences, are on board with this. It's just pulling them out of their individual little research projects and trying to, work with different people.
I know the
Yeah.
second part of my question was broader, and to see how your work could help facilitate some of those discussions as far as faculty retention and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. So right now, I'm a chair of a search committee where we're trying to attract the senior hire in health technology and aging. And so it's really nice to be able to sell this idea of integrating our research with the community to them, to attract them to come to this community. So that's one. And then also after they've retired, to try to keep them and retain them in the community. I think that's important too. So, educating our faculty what exists in the community for age-friendly, maybe would sway them to make decisions in retirement that might include staying in Urbana.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Diane was next, and then Ms. Roberts, then Dennis.
Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you, Dan.
The little wheel that you showed with the various aspects that the index measured, it seems it's not just 8. No, the 8 or 9 measures that you're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it seems not. It's not just an age-friendly thing. It seems like just people-friendly
Exactly.
factors. So how? I guess my first question would be, how do you tailor this to older people, and what's your definition of an aged person? And I just wondered if you're familiar. There's a couple years ago I attended a presentation by, I can't remember his name, but it was on the 8 to 80. It's a philosophy of, are you familiar with this? Yeah, okay. But anyway, it was the philosophy that if you make a community that is good for an 8-year-old and good for an 80-year-old, everybody in between it's going to be good for everyone in between. So I appreciate what you're saying here, but I kind of am a little hesitant about focusing on one age category when these things
So
are
the
for
focus
everybody.
on the aging would be to query older adults in the community about their experiences. So that's what's you get their perspective, and that's what focuses it on aging. Now you're right in saying that if the problems associated with aging aren't uncommon to middle-aged adults or younger, and so by improving age friendliness, you're actually improving livability across all ages.
So what ages are you including in your focus groups? Do you propose? Or do you
So
think about?
we're about aging. Greater than 60 years old, I would say.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, that demographic, as I showed, is increasing dramatically, and I can't imagine that Urbana's going to be immune to that.
Well,
the
no
whole
one's
world.
immune if you're
Yeah,
lucky.
exactly, right. No one's immune to aging.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Yes, thanks for the presentation. What other communities in the region are you engaging to initiate this study?
So this isn't, well, it's a study in the sense that we'll be doing some evaluation and then some planning. It's not a research study in the sense that I think of the way research is run. I mean, we're not looking for, significance and, all that stuff. We are going to engage Champaign. In fact, I have a meeting with the mayor of Champaign tomorrow.
So this is a very focused local U of I community
Absolutely.
study.
Yeah. And it may branch out to the Champaign County because, our rural older adults, face unique sets of challenges as well. So, how this goes forward, I don't know, but I mean, I do know that Urbana and Champaign are central players here.
And then what responsibilities does the city have once it engages? Is there a committee that has to be formed to do the work of collecting or evaluating, or is
Yeah,
this
well,
all
I
going to be
mean,
through your department?
I certainly want involvement from, the city, but, saving that, or maybe even representation. But, I think with the stakeholders that I know already, including a couple sitting behind me and others, and, myself and some some university researchers, we certainly could populate advisory committees as well as gather information from older adults living in the community. So right now, it's really about gathering support and enthusiasm for the project. At some point in time, during the implementation phase, there may be recommendations brought forward that may need, some decisions made from, the decision makers of the city. There's some problem that we see. What can we do to fix it? What resources do we have available that could address it?
I think Mr. Emmons was next, and then Mayor Pressing.
Well, I was just going to say that most of the people up here qualify to serve as a representative for your
Absolutely.
Your program. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist that one, y'all. And I do think it's a good piece. I do appreciate what Diane said about 8 to 80. You know, I'm always going to, not always. Hopefully, it won't be always. Hopefully, this will change over the next 4 or 5 years. That I won't have to keep raising these particular things. But there are nuances, as you said. The elderly community in the rural areas have unique challenges, and I think that certainly for the African American community, we have very unique challenges as well. And I don't think automatically that a community like this, what's being described here, just automatically makes it best for everyone. There's a little work that has to be done. And I think what Alderman Jacobson mentioned earlier about the discrepancies we've been dealing with in traffic stops and stuff like that, and the marijuana stuff that he was discussing, shows that we have some unique challenges. So I guess I got sort of off base with my questioning with you. Are you working with the elderly in the African American community? Have you identified a group or something like that that you would?
So not locally, but I will say that we have researchers in our college that work on health disparities with minorities, and also health equity as well as social justice. So we have those representations and expertise at the university that we could bring to bear to try to evaluate and address some of the issues in the community. Yeah.
If I could give away the chair for just a moment, because I know I'm jumping line, but I have a question that's directly relevant to what Aaron said, and that is, would it be feasible to break the community up for purposes of the study to calculate these indices for different regions of the city, so that we could look at, what is it like to be old in my ward as compared to Aaron's ward or Charlie's ward, or any of our areas, because I think that would be very important, and that would get right at the question. Not completely, but largely, the wards are very different in ethnic.
So we might be able to do that kind of fine grain analysis as we get into the process. But I will say that this AARP livability index doesn't do that. I mean, it's just kind of by city. But as we go through this process, there may be ways in which we can, target different wards and do focus groups in those wards to get, geographically specific information and recommendations from the focus
I think
groups.
that would really add value
Okay.
from the perspective
Sure.
of our decision making.
Good point.
And I apologize, Mayor Pressing.
Okay, going from the neighborhood to the world. I was going to ask you what countries really did this start in? You have the World Health Organization,
Yeah.
so what continents? Is this all
Yeah,
over the world right now, or
I'm not
and where is it
it's-
most active?
It's probably not most active in the United States, although it's gaining momentum, and mainly that's a testament to the AARP and their toolkits and efforts to make it easier for communities to go through this evaluative and planning process. There's an office in D.C., a woman that I've contacted, and she's very helpful, and she's willing to come out and speak with us, and there's local representatives for AARP that I've talked to, and so there is support for that. Now, your question about globally, I don't have a good answer for, but I get the sense that maybe South America is a big player in terms of age friendliness. Also, I know this is a big problem in Asia, in China, in Singapore, in terms of the older community and not having the support of family and being at distances away, so that older adults have to live alone in environments that aren't quite.
So that might have been a more recent change in Asia than
Yeah.
it was in Europe.
Yeah.
So maybe there's more concern about this
Yeah,
huge population shift.
Yes. And there's cultural things too. I mean, Asian cultures tend to value older adults more than our culture, and so there's a very big push there for age friendliness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to Diane's point. It's Gil Penalosa. He was mayor of Bogota, Colombia, and started a group called 880. And basically the philosophy is that if you make it, say, a city walkable for 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds, you create a very livable
Absolutely.
environment. And so I don't want to lose track, many of the things that probably improve life for seniors and those of us who are maturing, speaking of maturity,
Everybody.
Yes.
and looking at our retirement alternatives, and living and all that, things that we do there, we should also keep in mind, we can't lose track of the fact that we have children in our community and 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds and whatever. They don't vote, but we have to keep them in mind at the same time and make sure that that what we create works for them. And in fact, if you think about it, we'll probably become a more attractive retirement community thanks to global warming. It's going to be a little
Niño.
warmer. Yeah, you won't have to leave town for the winter maybe quite so often. But anyway, yeah, we got to keep in mind that there are children that will benefit too. So anytime we can do something, and we look at this chart, anytime we can do something that's a twofer, I'd support it.
Yeah, I mean, there's one example when you talk about across the age range where one community put in a grandparents' park, kind of like a park where grandparents could take the grandkids and interact. So there were things for the older people to do and things for the younger people to do simultaneously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
stuff like that.
that's
Yeah,
the kind of thing.
yeah,
And so I think as we look at this, like I said, anything that is a twofer, I think is
Yeah,
probably
sure.
a good one.
Yeah, we'll consider that. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else? So maybe if I may ask one question, what is the very next step?
So the next step, as I talked to Mayor Pressing, is to get a letter of support from the mayor. I think there was one other thing, maybe a picture of the community that represent, some kind of representative picture, electronic picture of your community, what you want to represent, because I guess that gets posted on some site or something. I'll have to find out exactly, but certainly a letter of support from the mayor. That's required in the to enter the network. Now, I don't see us really entering the network till this summer, so that this symposium that we're hosting on April 26th will bring together stakeholders. That will kind of be the kickoff. It's advantageous to do a little bit of groundwork before you enter the network so you don't get behind in your timelines. So some of the evaluation and data gathering, if that can happen before we enter the network, we'll be at an advantage moving forward so we don't get caught behind any deadlines. And that's the beauty of this process. It's deadline driven and things need to be done on a certain time frame, which is good because it keeps things moving.
Is that symposium open to the public?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I think we've beaten this topic to death, worthy topic as it is. So
It's an easy sell.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we now are at the stage where we should consider approval of the minutes of the Oh, I'm sorry, we aren't at that stage. We have a discussion of haulers' hours from Public Works. Last but certainly not least,
Good evening. The city currently regulates the days of the week that licensed garbage haulers can operate. The city also provides recycling service through a contract as a franchise contract collection. The city has not previously regulated the hours of operation on the 3 days that garbage collection is provided for. And due to complaints that city staff has received, as well as complaints that city councilors have received, staff was asked to investigate what types of hauler operating hours ordinances could be created. In your packet, there's a document that has 3 different options for potentially adoption of licensed hauler operating hours. All 3 of these options have a start time X'd out. I don't think it's for staff. I don't think staff needs to directly say 7 a.m., 6 a.m., 5 a.m., or anything like that. That can be part of council discussion. Additionally, all 3 options entail what I would say are trade-offs. That is, you get some things and you give up some other things. So in setting licensed hauler operating hours, which really means start time, in setting licensed hauler operating hours, you certainly could get additional quietude early in the morning. But you're going to give up some other things, and those are things that we've talked about when we discussed this before. You would be shifting the time that haulers are operating to later in the day, which might cause more interactions with pedestrians, bikes, and other cars. So I'm presenting all of these 3 as different options that council can evaluate, but all of them having trade-offs. I'll just briefly mention all 3. The first one would set hauler operating hours only in residential zones. The second one would set hauler operating hours in residential and commercial zones separately. So for instance, commercial zones could have licensed haulers operating earlier in the morning. The third one would set hauler operating hours at the same time throughout the city. And there's probably permutations of all 3 of those that you can imagine. I've included a number of documents from the city's zoning ordinance publication because if council were to choose to adopt an ordinance that set operating hours in certain zones, I think it would be advantageous to simply utilize the existing zoning areas. And to demonstrate that, Jeff Engstrom with the Planning Division was kind enough to take the existing zoning areas and dissolve them into 2 groups, a primarily residential group and a primarily commercial group. And that map is also in the packet. I've laid out licensed hauler operating hours as part of Chapter 10, Waste Management. And doing so would mean that any of the compliance and enforcement mechanisms in that chapter could also be utilized to ensure compliance with such an operating hours ordinance. And that can include fines, license suspension, and license revocation. Staff tonight is seeking guidance from council as to whether, 1, operating hours are of interest to the council, and 2, which of the 3 options that we've described here seem most advantageous.
questions or comments? Yes, Dennis.
Hi. Well, Scott, I think that this is kind of a pretty complex question that might take a little bit of thought to pull together. And it's hard to come up with recommendations or suggestions like just in a week or less, until the next city council meeting. So I assume that we're going to be talking about this for a month or two, maybe, I don't know. Is there a fourth option? And I guess I want to ask this. I guess there's 5 options. One would be that the city would actually take over a collection of trash, the trash collection, and then manage it in a way that would be uniform across the city. But we do have independent operators with independent needs and independent clients. If the clientele, what would be the likelihood of managing the program by district rather than by individual client sign-up? And could the city be divided into 5 or 6 districts, each assigned to a registered hauler, and then could the city then also have stipulated hours that were even and uniform across the board? And would it be possible to rotate the assignment of districts on an annual basis, much like the snow removal policy is for addressing street snow removal? I mean, there's other ways that one could imagine managing waste removal from the city, and I don't know what prerogatives the city actually has which wouldn't conflict with private interests in signing up customers. But if we divided the city into zones which had equal number of households to be serviced, that might be another way of looking at waste haul collection in the city. It may not address complaints about the timing so much, but some operators are more flexible than others in hours, and I just don't know if this is a conversation that might lead to more efficient management in general, rather than having 6 haulers going down the same street to different customers on the block.
Yeah. Mayor Pressing. Oh, sure. Okay, sorry.
Certainly, there are some cities that directly provide garbage service as a city utility, and there are some cities that franchise garbage collection in the same way that Urbana franchises recycling collection. And if you did either of those, you certainly could control every little detail, including the operating hours or the start time. And so I suppose those would satisfy folks' concerns about early morning quietude. However, I don't think those are necessary. Or to put it another way, an ordinance that restricts operating hours would also satisfy folks' interest in early morning quietude without making other changes.
Except, can I just counteract that? Is that if you have 3 trucks going down the same street on their own schedules, you are having triple quietude challenges than if you had an assigned route to various contractors, because then he would be stopping at every single house but only once. And I think that approach might satisfy some of the problems just as much as setting late hours.
Okay. Yeah. Now, Mayor.
Yeah, I think that this Urbana City Council has addressed this many years ago, and people were very determined that they wanted to keep their garbage hauler. So in response to the complaints about noise, I think we're trying to just address it the smallest way possible. I don't think we're necessarily trying to revamp the entire system, but just sort of address that. I'm not bothered by the noise on my street, but I know some people are. So I think we're trying to keep it from becoming a giant overhaul when that may not be what's required here.
Okay. Mr. Smythe.
Yeah, a lot of this has come because of the complaints that have come out of my neighborhood. people being woken up at 4 or 5 in the morning, including myself, by various companies. Like Dennis, if we wanted efficiency and we wanted better programs, we would probably do a franchise. Because under a franchise, you can merge your recycling, yard waste, and garbage pickup into a single program, and you can start doing things like composting and limb pickup and other things. Communities that have franchised hauling have much better, much more comprehensive programs, probably at a cheaper price than we're currently paying combined across the board. So we pay a premium as residents for having our own individual haulers. Okay, we have 8, I think, is it 8? Yeah, we have 8 companies doing business in Urbana. Some of them are the big players, and we have a number of small independent haulers. We've had informal agreements through the years about start times. They were managed by a person who's fairly retired, pretty much retired out of the business now, and she brokered it for a number of years and took care of things when things happened. That's no longer out there, and that informally agreed time was 6 a.m. And so one of the questions I have for Scott is, I think you said you found 6 a.m. was a very common time across communities. How many communities did you look at, or you could tell us a little more about your survey?
Yeah, actually, the city of Champaign years ago did a survey, and I followed up with a number of the cities that were on the survey to see if some of them have changed and to fill in some blanks. There was maybe 24 downstate cities on that survey, and about half of them had the sort of private garbage collection service that we have, and about half of those had some start time or operating hours restrictions, and there was variability, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 6:30, 7, but 6 a.m. seemed to be kind of the mean and the average. Mean and medium, yes.
Okay. And then in those communities surveyed, are the times set for residential or for the entire city? How did they mix and match?
That's a good question. I don't have that level of detail.
I think I saw another hand over here. Yes, Diane.
So would we regulate this under the noise ordinance? Or what is the proposed route to do this?
I would recommend regulating it under hauler operating requirements, I think is the title of the section in Chapter 10, which is solid waste management, rather than the noise ordinance. It's a lot more simple to do so that way, I think.
And I haven't received any complaints except at Yankee Ridge School, where the hauler was coming around 4:30, and it took several phone calls, but we got that settled. So now it's 6 o'clock, which is what the school district contract specifies. So where are the complaints centered in West Urbana, or where are they centered?
I think most of them are in West Urbana, and I think it seems that city councilors are getting a lot more complaints than staff do.
But is it still West Urbana?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've had probably 2 or 3 complaints from my ward in the past 6 months. Seems like it is kind of when you have your windows, when you're more likely to have your windows open, and then also when you're next door to a commercial, a big dumpster, because those are really loud. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I suppose if it's only West Urbana, you could divide it up and break up a zone with the earlier start times, but that doesn't really seem fair to people who are disturbed elsewhere that just never got around to complaining, because we all know West Urbana will let you know what they think, and if other parts of town don't, that's not fair to them. But I guess of these options, I'd probably favor one time rather than 2 different times for commercial, because a lot of our commercial, you go down the back alley to get to the dumpster, and you're on the other side of the alley is a residence. So that's, I guess, as a starting point for these. As long as I have the microphone. If we did something like Dennis was talking about, some kind of franchise agreement, would you be able to somehow allocate parts of the city to represent the current kind of market share that current garbage haulers have, so that you could still do like 8 haulers, but everybody would have certain number of residences that they couldn't still have? Or is that would you run into antitrust violations? Are there problems with that? Do you know anything? Have you looked into that at all?
Yes. That's how Portland, right, established their hauler franchise. There are some pretty serious drawbacks to that. They did what you suggested, which was they evaluated the current market share, and instead of one hauler having 600 accounts all over the city, they gave them 600 accounts in one area. And in that sense, they got some routing efficiency. But years and years and years later, all those haulers have the exact same amount of market share. So they've sort of locked some businesses in at the exact same level and locked everyone else out. You can imagine, how do you set prices when there's no competition? Well, the city every few years has to hire consultants to do a study and set prices. So there's some pretty serious trade-offs in that scenario as well.
Yeah, Diane.
Well, I think we have at least one commercial hauler, or several. We have haulers in the audience, and I'm just curious, residential. So what does a 6 a.m. start time do for your businesses? Yes, please, if the chair allows.
Yes, no, please. In fact, when I was waiting my turn after everybody else spoke, and then I wanted to hear from the haulers, so please come forward.
Was there anybody else that wanted to say anything before?
The only thing is that I ask you identify which hauling company you represent here, please.
My name's Josh Parr. I'm from Dale Levitt Disposal.
Chris's Service Company.
And Schaefer Sanitary.
So, I know that Scott had discussed that there would be some trade-offs to us starting later. I feel like there are numerous problems that could happen if we start later, whereas there's only one thing that's really going to be fixed, which is the noise issue. And in reality, I don't believe that it will really truly be fixed. Even if you make it 7 o'clock, who's to say that somebody isn't going to call and say, well, at 7:15 somebody was down my street and it was really loud and I just didn't like it. You know, it's not going to be a complete fix. And then also the residential to commercial. I only pick up residential. I only have dumpsters outside of the city, and I only have I think I have 3 dumpsters. I believe that the majority of the sound issues are potentially coming from the bigger companies that pick up the dumpsters and things early in the morning. And the reason why they go so early in the morning is because sometimes it's difficult for them to get to the dumpsters. And if there's people walking, how are they going to get to them in a efficient manner? And I'm not a commercial hauler, so I can't really speak to that. But I can guarantee you, if you have us start at 6 and still allow some of these other companies to start at 2 in the morning, you're still going to have problems. And I really don't think that the majority of the complaints are coming from residential hauling. I don't know if you guys get anything.
I have nothing to say other than, I mean, it doesn't really matter what you do, you're still going to have complaints. I mean, that's Urbana.
About right.
I would also like to say about the zoning, like to split us up into different zones. It would be very difficult to do that because some areas of the city have, for instance, West Urbana, I happen to know just through my customers over there, there's a lot of recycling over there. There are a lot of people that do great. They have very little amount of garbage. But then there are certain parts of the city where they don't utilize the recycling. And it would be unfair because I pay by weight when I dump. And it's my #1 expense. And so if you put me in an area where there was more garbage, and you put him in an area where there's more recycling to garbage, I'm going to lose out. I'm going to be paying way more money than he is for my dump bill. And a separate issue from this, I believe that, and I don't know if this is something that anyone's ever talked about, but there is a disparity among middle class and wealthy individuals recycling and poor individuals recycling. And like I said, it's a separate thing, but I think that at some point that should be addressed in the city, and having the recycle program that we provide, making sure that everyone knows about it and utilizes it. But like I said, that's a separate issue.
Yes, Charlie.
Yeah, well, since a lot of the complaints came out of from my constituents, I asked them what would be an acceptable time, and most of them agreed that 6 a.m. was a good compromise. And yes, there were some that wanted 7, some of them even wanted 8. 8 was the old noise ordinance time,
Well,
and that was
sleep until
changed to
7
7.
then.
Yeah, well, yeah, I understand, and I think Scott's pointed out the problem with trying to zone things. It's either, I think the issue is that we had an informal working agreement at 6 a.m. for many years. It's broken down. It broke down a couple of times through Cindy's, but through Cindy's efforts, she got it back on track. She's not involved so much anymore. The complaints have not been resolved, and after 15 years on the city council, listening to the same complaint, it's just time to put it to rest. And so, I favor something 6 a.m. I'll give you a couple stories. I mean, I asked to have a city contract enforced because I was getting woken up every Wednesday morning between 4 and 4:30, and frankly, I don't do well at getting back to sleep. My wife does even worse, and so we already live in a student area where there is a lot of noise all the time anyway. And so just being able to eliminate one major bit of noise that happens multiple times on a Monday morning or a Wednesday morning or a Tuesday morning, depending on who's getting picked up. In my case, it's Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. There's a garbage truck or a recycling truck outside my window. Okay, and so knowing that I'm going to be able to sleep till 6 a.m. without getting woken up 3 days out of the week represents a lot of my constituents. It's me, and it's my and I'm an example of a constituent complaint here. And so I'm all in favor of a 6 a.m. time, and I want to let you guys do your business because I like having the fact that I pay a little extra, but I pay for 1 can, and I get it picked up at the back door. And I really, really appreciate that. Okay, and I don't want to lose that. Okay, but at the same time, I'm tired of losing my sleep. And so, yeah.
Well, I mean, how many other people lose sleep? I mean, I can understand you're getting woke up occasionally by a garbage truck. That's going to happen wherever you live.
I'm getting woken up 3 days a week, every week. That's what I'm saying, okay?
Can I make a suggestion? Well, now you said 3 days a week. Is that potentially due to the commercial? Because I mean, we can only be on your your street on Monday. So I'm trying to.
Yes, there's a residential on Monday, commercial on Tuesday, recycling on Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah.
Okay. But
Well,
recycling
no,
can't start till
not
7.
not the city recycling.
Ah, the commercial
It was
recycling.
it was multifamily recycling.
Okay.
Okay.
Because one suggestion I was going to make, and this would, I guess that this wouldn't affect your Tuesday and Wednesday, but I feel that the majority of the complaints have come on Monday, and I guess I just feel that changing the entire city over one small area is kind of, I mean, it's.
Well, you know, the thing is, I've got constituents that will speak out because they're used to speaking out and they're used to participatory democracy, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean that people in the rest of the community aren't equally annoyed. They just simply don't know how to complain. So I don't buy that argument.
Bill?
Yeah, I'd actually agree with that. There may be variation in the city depending on what kind of house you live in. Maybe in some of the newer parts where the insulation's better and you have your air conditioning on all the time, the window's closed, you won't notice it. But I don't. And in West Urbana, there are a lot of older houses, but there are a lot of older houses all over the city, and a lot of us have our windows open from March till October. And so, I mean, I hear the garbage trucks go by, and I get woken up now and then, and I'm sure a lot of other people do too. And they make a great point. We have a noise ordinance that says, you know, you can't start your lawnmower at 7 o'clock in the morning. Why should you be able to drive a garbage truck and squeal your brakes? And it's probably, you know, a small percentage of the time, and it's probably maybe one or two companies. I don't know. I don't bother to get up and look. But it's too bad that, you know, a few people are probably making noise and you all might have to start later for it. But, yeah, you might be able to sleep in a little bit.
Well, I mean, I'd like to point out that we don't like to wake up at 3:30 in the morning to go to work. We do it because we feel it is a necessity. I mean, obviously, we want. I mean, it's like I said at the last meeting I was at. I'm a part of this community. I live in Urbana. My kids live here, and in no way do I want to alienate anybody in Urbana over anything. And I would just like to say, my garbage company, I know for a fact, when we get a complaint, we take immediate action. And I can guarantee you that no one that has complained about my company is still complaining. And I think that to completely take it out of our hands and to pass an ordinance over it, I just don't feel that it's the correct course of action.
Charlie, could you take
Yeah.
the chair?
Eric.
So I would feel much better able to say something sensible about this issue if I could see a map of the complaints. Where are they, and maybe some indication of the times of day that they are. I don't feel comfortable guessing about the mindset of people who don't communicate with us. I personally would like to focus on those areas where the complaints are coming from and see if we can fashion a targeted solution for those and create a process where we can flexibly, if the pattern of complaints changes, if when we solve one person's problem or one neighborhood's problem, something pops up elsewhere, that we can flexibly, you know, try to deal with that. One of the things that you hadn't raised, but that I understood was one of the issues, is that in the summer you want to finish your workday fairly early because of the heat of the day. Because you've got to wear some fairly heavy protective clothing, and if it's 90 degrees outside, that's, you know, in the afternoon sun, that's actually maybe a health or safety hazard. So I guess I would personally try to get more information about the pattern of complaints and then see if we can develop a targeted process for addressing the complaints that are received. And now I'll take the chair back.
Yeah,
Let
well-
everybody else address. Yeah.
Well, that was the way that Cindy tried to deal with it, okay? And the whole point was that 6 a.m. was the compromise time that everybody could live with and that people honored. And what I'm saying is that I want to formalize that 6 a.m. start time, because I think, and we have 3 of the 8 haulers here. The other 5 companies aren't even here. And so,
A few
you know,
of them
my
are mostly
feeling-
commercial.
that may be. And, you know, they're, like I said, in my neighborhood, I've got everybody coming through. The only one that I know never wakes me up is the city residential recycling on Thursday. When I hear them at 7:30 or 8:30, it's a reminder to get my recycling out to the curb. The thing is, we had exactly that kind of a system that you were sort of describing via Cindy Egeland. And we don't have that anymore. And what I want to do is, by using 6 a.m. as a compromise time under one of these options, we essentially achieve what she was doing for us. You know, with calls would come into Scott or Scott's office, and they would get shuttled around, and things would get dealt with. And you know, it was sort of like whack-a-mole too. You know, noises would go down one place and noises would come up somewhere else.
Sure.
So yeah, I just, like I said, after 15 years of hearing the same complaint and having a noise ordinance where we changed it from 8 a.m. to 7 a.m. against my constituents' wishes. You remember, I voted against that change. You know, and that was done because of, for weather issues, you know, to let people start at 7 a.m. when it was hotter. I think 6 a.m. is a perfectly fine start time for garbage hauling. That lets them get done by 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I know they've got to get it hauled off to landfill, okay, which I think closes at 4, right? 4 o'clock in Danville?
3 at the...
Danville's 3 o'clock, so they've got to get to Danville by 3. You know, so I recognize that. So, you know, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna recommend 6 a.m. under one of these options.
I mean, I would like to, kind of on what you were saying, I just guess I can't understand how we can't have a system that if someone does call and complain, every hauler is notified, and we say, hey, on this street at this time we got this complaint, this can't happen again. I guess it just goes back to me to just kind of being like, over 15 years, have there been 50 complaints? Have there been more? Have there been less? And so I guess my question is, there are thousands of people that live here, and are we really going to change the entire system over some complaints?
Yes.
Certainly in your guys' hands to do that.
You know, look, I'm sorry, but you know, when you get complaint after complaint after complaint about the same thing from different people over years, it's time to fix the problem. We had a solution. It was 6 a.m. That was the compromise. That was what we came up with a number of years ago. That's not being honored anymore. That 6 a.m. applied across the community, all haulers. That's not being honored anymore, okay? You guys have changed over, and people have retired, and that's not being honored, and I just want to formalize the process. So we're just done with this once and for all.
Mr. Emmons.
Well, I really think that the point that you are making about in a participatory democracy that you're participating in the majority rules, that you have a very good point in that there are thousands and thousands of people who live here, and there seems to be a small number of people who are complaining, even though it comes from the West Urbana area. And I feel for my colleague that there's a concern that his constituents continue to raise, and if you all were unwilling to address it, then I would be more inclined to support the initiative. but it takes 4 votes, not just one, to get something done up here. And so I don't agree that we should just simply go back to a blanket policy. I will say, though, I don't get woke up until 6:30. So, I understand that there's a concern that, I may not be in that particular lot. But if I were to raise that concern and the person or the company was willing to address it, if I were in your shoes, I would want the chance to address it in-house as easily as possible before making some blanket policy or enforcement of the policy. So I do think that what you proposed, and if we can have an actual mapping of where this is taking place and who's complaining and who are they complaining against, I think that's a legitimate request from the hauling companies to say, at least tell me who my accuser is. I mean, what's going on here? Let me see who this is and let me try to address it. I think it's reasonable. Maybe I'm wrong.
Diane?
I'm trying to understand how you all operate. Do you start at 4 o'clock every morning, or what time do you start in the morning? In every area of the city?
We're probably different. We probably start at different times. I start at 4:30, but some of the days, I start like out in the country or in areas that are not necessarily in Urbana.
So in Urbana, how many days are you operating?
We can only pick up 3 days a week.
3 days. So every day you're in Urbana, you start at 4:30 somewhere?
Yes.
Okay. And how about the rest of the companies?
Well, I'm out of Philo, and we don't leave our shop between 5:15 and 5:30, so we get to Urbana about 5:40, 5:45.
So you're close to 6.
And we
Okay.
only here Monday and Tuesdays.
Okay.
Well, I kind of get to Urbana anywhere between 4 to 5 o'clock in the morning. Depends on how my route runs in Champaign. So I actually start at midnight.
In Champaign?
Yes.
Holy moly.
Yep. We've been doing that for 22 years and had no complaints.
And do you go to the same
Yep.
area of town?
Same
You've done
area, same houses. We haven't had any complaints. So, I mean, it used to be they call us, we take care of the problem, and that was it. As far as
Well, if someone called you and said, you're coming to my house at 4:45 and I don't like it, what would you do about it?
I would go to another area and run that area and come back.
So someone else would be calling, possibly.
Well,
Or
you
possibly
know-
not, possibly not.
Thing is somebody's got to complain. The whole thing is we try to get done before the weather's an issue. Snow, freezing, temperatures, heat, it's all about just getting it done at night or even around schools.
Right, right.
Little kids, that's the main thing, Yeah, go ahead.
I think another thing that needs to kind of be brought up too is that we have guys working on the backs of these trucks. Sometimes it's 33 degrees and it's raining. Sometimes it's 40 below outside. Sometimes it's 105. We just want to get done. This is like a very taxing job, and the guys on the back are working extremely hard. And when you ask me to start an hour later, yes, it's 1 hour. But what happens is you push me up into where the traffic is occurring, and likely you're going to add 45 minutes to maybe even 2 hours onto my day. And that's time that I've got to pay that guy, I've got to pay for the gas, I got to pay for the wear and tear in my truck, and then I got to worry about the possibility of that guy on the back of my truck getting hurt from just being exhausted.
Yeah,
I do want to say that I do have a friend of mine who works, and he's worked in this area for a long, long time, and he is one of the guys that's on the back of the truck. I worked for the moving crew at the university, and I had to be outside in all types of weather as well. Personally, I'm not, there's no way you're going to avoid. I don't think the weather argument is the strongest thing for me. Because if it's 5, 10 below at 12 o'clock or at 4 o'clock, you're still going to go out, right? So the heat part may make sense to start early in the day, but you're not, your reverse argument is not that, well, I'm going to start later in the day when it's cold so it's warmer. So you understand what I'm saying?
Well, but we're getting done faster, so then he doesn't have to be out there. You also got to remember
Okay,
that
that
they're
makes
riding on
sense.
the back of a truck,
Yeah.
so you're adding wind chill to that factor.
Yeah.
So.
Mayor Pressing.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was what we discussed in the staff meetings, that the later you start, the more interactions with other vehicles. And that slows the whole process down, and it also opens it up for more accidents, collisions between vehicles or pedestrians.
Yeah, I find that the later you operate, when you pull up, especially if you're on a busier street, but when you pull up to dump a can, the cars around you, they just want to get by you. They don't care what you're doing. All they want to do is to get by you. And sometimes if there's a bunch of traffic coming, there's almost like a buildup of tension. Like you can kind of feel it where people are like, you know, and it's going to cause that much more of like, oh, well, I want to get around this guy. I'm going to hurry up. And I just don't think that it's a necessary change.
Just a quick, how many hours are you out? Because do you do 8 hours when you go on the run? How long?
It depends. Monday is our lightest day, and then Tuesday or Wednesday are our heaviest days. Monday we maybe get done in 6 or 7 hours, and then Tuesday and Wednesday between 8 and 10 hours.
Okay.
But that's just me. I don't know what these guys.
I mean, every day varies. I mean, usually average is about 6 to 7 that they're out there, and then you got your drivers that go to the landfill and stuff. But the runners on the back, 6 to 7.
So if I could you, or do you have a comment?
I have a comment to
Okay,
make
you
here,
can
yeah.
comment, and then
Yeah,
then I'll ask you to-
again, the issue is 6 a.m. was a good compromise time. The school district requires 6 a.m. because of noise issues where created around the schools. I note that 5 of the companies aren't here, yet they were all notified of this. Chris is here, starts at 5:45. 15 minutes isn't going to make much of a difference. You know, and so I don't buy the traffic argument all that much because, frankly, you know, until 8 o'clock, you know, if we were talking about starting at 7 versus 8, I could see the argument here. But, you know, you're still out there at 8, 9, 10 a.m. in the morning working. And so you're in the middle of traffic regardless. And shifting your start time, in your case, an hour and a half, 15 minutes in your case, and in your case it would be, again, much like Josh's, I think, coming over from Champaign. I can't believe that you haul in the middle of the night. Is most of your stuff commercial or big?
It's all residential.
All residential. Okay, that's amazing. My neighborhood would never never go for that. But I will say that I note that you have one of the quietest trucks around because you do pick up in my neighborhood next door. So, and I know your truck because it comes, and you come after 7. You come at 7:30 in my neighborhood or next to my house. So, and the truck makes almost no noise. So I appreciate that. But again, I think 6 a.m. was an agreed upon time that worked for years and years, and I don't see why we can't formalize that. So Eric?
I guess what I would like to see is Scott, if we could assess the feasibility of a procedure where all complaints that came to any of us would be forwarded to Public Works, maybe to Scott or to whoever would be designated, and relayed to the carrier, and to see if the complaints could be dealt with by carriers adjusting their, the order in which they go on different streets. So I can see two outcomes of that. One would be that maybe we could largely solve the problem that way, or it could be like playing whack-a-mole. As soon as we solved it here, it would pop up there. And but I'd like to give that I'd like to actually ask about the feasibility of that before I would consider, a citywide ordinance change.
In the 3.5 years that I've lived and worked in Urbana, the practice at Public Works has been anytime a early morning noise complaint was received regarding garbage trucks, staff would take that complaint, and if the particular company involved was known, staff would call or email that company, notify them, ask them to change their route so that they wouldn't go down that street so early. If the particular company was not known, staff would contact all of the haulers and let them know this complaint was heard. The haulers are under no obligation to change their routes since there's no ordinance to that effect. That's precisely been our practice. We do not receive very many complaints, or at least we don't log very many complaints. I don't receive most of them per year. We don't receive very many. What counselors have aggregated in terms of complaints is far exceeds what staff does.
Well, maybe I'll ask Charlie or any of other council colleagues if you're not, forwarding complaints to Public Works, could that be done in order to try this?
Yeah, typically what I do is usually Charlie beats me to it if it's on the WUNA list. If it's on our neighborhood email list, he'll go ahead and forward it to Bill or Scott. If I get one directly, I'll forward it to them, and I'll also encourage people to use our Citizens Voice link on our webpage. Just as a general rule, on our email list, now and then we remind people that exists, that you can just click that button and it goes directly to Public Works and where they log all the complaints. So I think everything that's coming to me that I can remember has been forwarded.
I guess that's the question. Is it all getting there? Yeah, Dennis.
And it seems I'm probably more likely to try to support Aaron's approach, not to legislate time necessarily, but to try to be effective in responding to complaints. And it seems like one of the factors that you have to think about is when do these gentlemen have to complete their routes to still get to the Danville landfill before it closes, if it closes at 3. And I don't know if you guys hold garbage overnight and make a run later, but if you have
Try not to.
if you have a 7-hour day or an 8-hour pickup day, you're going to have to start before 6 to make the run to the Danville landfill before it closes, and feel like you can make it not in 2-minute time, but with 2 minutes to spare, but probably 20 minutes to spare. So I don't know if you can always guarantee that 6 o'clock can be legislated as the start time.
Well, for myself, I actually dump at the Urbana transfer station, so I don't have nearly as far to go. But they do close at 3 as well. I don't know if you guys would have any problems getting to the dump. So.
Well, I wouldn't.
That's not a problem, actually.
Well, there's also a big price difference between the transfer to the landfill.
Oh, yeah.
It's like $50 difference a ton. So most of us go to the landfill.
Yeah, Charlie, I don't know where we're
Yeah,
actually.
I guess I feel like a broken record at this point. I keep saying that we've tried various combinations of the things that everybody's pointed out here through the years. After 15 years of trying these things, it's time to put in place the time that we all agreed on in various meetings with haulers over the time of 6 a.m. That's my point, is that solves the problem. When that 6 a.m. time is honored, people understand that the landfills and the transfer stations close, that they've got to get started at 6 a.m. That gives them an 8-hour day, it gets them done at 2 p.m., and they can get stuff sent to landfill or take advantage of the local location. So 6 a.m. is, to me, a very reasonable compromise time here. And the alternative, and frankly, is going to a franchise system where we would get a lot more bang for our buck.
Eric?
Can I say something about the franchise?
Yeah, you can. I think you can. But let me just say that it's almost 10 o'clock, and we haven't even attempted to address any of the actual items on our agenda. And so I think that if this discussion could be curtailed so that we could actually do the business of the council, this would be a great benefit to most of us.
I don't need, I think I've said what I need to say. Scott, I don't know if you've gotten any clear direction. I mean, I guess there are a couple of us who've said different things. Do you feel that you have, do you think that you feel you have direction? I mean, I know what I would like to see you do, and I hope I've stated that clearly enough.
I think your suggestion is essentially what our practice has been. One change would be if more of the complaints that counselors received were forwarded to staff with addresses. Sometimes we get the complaint, but it's not very specific.
Okay.
Addresses and/or the companies involved. But aside from that, that's essentially been our practice.
Yeah, but that may be a big omission. There may be a lot of complaints that are essentially falling through the cracks because they're not getting to the haulers.
I think, as some others have said, and I'll change the metaphor, it's like squeezing a balloon. You're just moving the early morning operations to somewhere else. Now, if those other folks, if you happen to, figure out over time that there are certain neighborhoods where people really don't care or aren't bothered, then I guess that's a good outcome. Although, as some other counselors have mentioned, you may have folks who are silently suffering.
Well, I'm a deep sleeper. I never hear the trucks. So, yeah, so my sympathies, and really, my sympathies. Okay. I don't know what else to suggest as far as direction for staff.
Why don't we come back to this at some other time, because it's quite late now.
Okay.
The thing we need is to get input from the other 5 companies.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree too. Can I make one comment about franchising? I just would like to make this quick comment. So my grandfather started picking up garbage here 30 years ago in Urbana, and Urbana has been a second home to me throughout my childhood. I remember picking up garbage on my grandpa's truck when I was like 8 years old. And I have customers that I've had since I was this tall. And I think that Urbana is the kind of city that champions small business. And I hope that you guys never consider franchising, because this is my home and this is how I make my living. And I'm very proud to pick up garbage in Urbana.
So could you develop a technology that would just quietly vaporize it?
I wish. What, food scrap recycling?
Hey, thanks very much. I think we've got to move on.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Now, we are to finally approval of the minutes of previous meeting. And so there are 2 meetings, November 9th, 2015, and Charlie moves. Second. Charlie moves, Aaron seconds. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, I don't hear any nays. And January 4th, 2016, special meeting. Does Charlie move that also?
I've moved them both.
Charlie moved them both. Aaron, do you second them both?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, don't hear any nays. Very good. Public input. We have, unfortunately, I feel terrible because Scott Dossett left long ago, and we should have asked him to talk.
And I could probably provide that input.
Oh, okay.
All right, I think what he wanted to announce was that there's going to be a neighborhood meeting of the HUNA, Historic East Urbana Neighborhood Association, this Thursday at the library at 7. Partly we're going to be interested in talking about proposed developments on Vine Street, and we'd like to invite everybody to come. There's going to be one member of the Community Development Department there to give us information, and we'll have just come back from a tour of facilities that have already been built in Indianapolis, and so it might be a very interesting meeting to attend, and we encourage that. It's going to be at the library at 7 o'clock on Thursday this week, lower level auditorium.
Okay, thank you. And the other public input is from Reverend Dr. Evelyn Underwood, who does not wish to address the committee, but asks that she and her husband's concern about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem, their concern be entered into the record.
Just for announcements, public input, the Martin Luther King Scholarship celebration at the Cranard Performing Arts will be this Sunday from 5 to 7 p.m. And there's this lovely, lovely lady who's the keynote speaker, too. Okay. Your state representative, Carol Ammons, will be the keynote speaker. 5 to 7 p.m. at the Cranard Performing Arts Center, the MLK celebration, the scholarship fund that, of course, Bishop and Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood are also very much a part of.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Diane.
And one reminder, the Champaign County Economic Development Corporation and the University of Illinois are hosting the Innovation Celebration. You all should have gotten an invitation, but I just want to make sure it's on your calendar. January 22nd, 5:30 at Cranard Center lobby. This is where we celebrate and recognize entrepreneurs, inventors, the people in many making breakthroughs in many areas. And Urbana has at least a couple of people in the running for an award. One of those is Pixo, which is one of our pioneering companies in downtown Urbana. So it would be great if the City Council and Mayor and staff could come and celebrate the entrepreneurs in Urbana. And
What
hopefully
time?
cheer Pixo on. 5:30, January 22nd at Cranard.
Okay.
Let's get
Any-
these things done.
Okay, we are done with public input. Next item on the agenda is resolution number 2016-01-003R, and this is coming from legal.
This is simply a resolution seeking to intervene on a tax appeal regarding assessed value. We believe it's been under-assessed, or over-assessed, under-assessed, and we want to join in.
So move.
Second.
Okay.
Question?
Further discussion?
Jim, is this the same thing we passed in the township last week?
No, different property.
Is it, or it's different?
I believe it is. I'm not certain whether this is.
Yes.
Is
Oh.
it?
Going to help
Oh.
the township. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so we need a, can this be a voice vote? Or-
This is the committee.
So we're moving this to council.
Okay, so is there a motion to move this to council?
So
With
moved.
It's already been done.
Yeah.
It's been done.
Yeah.
Aaron Ammons, and I seconded, or else somebody else.
Okay, in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, I don't hear any nays. Now, ordinance number 2016-01-003, Public Works.
I thought the memo said everything. I'm ready to move this to council with a recommendation for approval.
You don't
Second.
even want to let him talk, huh?
The memo was very well written.
The memo is very well written. And every word that you say, you're going to lose ground.
I have nothing more to say. I'll just say this is a more unusual request that I would present, but if the memo is self-sufficient, I'll answer any questions.
Okay.
Why is it unusual?
The last time a fleet manager retired was 27 years ago.
All right.
Yeah, Bill.
So I guess what was surprising to me was that there wasn't some kind of, that we couldn't kind of, as a practice, hire somebody to start the day after somebody left. I mean, it seems like if that would be a goal. But it sounds like as a practice, we let the position be vacant just to save the money that we have to pay in retirement and everything.
Yes.
Wouldn't it make sense to build up some kind of fund so that we could train somebody and have somebody ready to step in the job, and assuming that it's a job that's needed 12 months out of the year?
Well, I think every department head would 100% agree, but for financial reasons, we haven't in the past.
Okay.
So
it should be a goal
that
that makes
takes
this unnecessary.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I guess if we ever come into some money, we could think about that.
It's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in an ideal world, you'd even have overlap, I'll point out, you know,
Right, right.
in some of these positions. So, yeah, overlap.
Overlap.
Yeah, so, yeah.
So, do I hear a motion? Motion seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No opposed. Ordinance 2016-01-004, also Public Works.
Hopefully my memo was as comprehensive as it was succinct as well. The city levies taxes on consumption of gas and electricity within the city. And normally cities like to exempt their own facilities from paying that tax. Otherwise, they're paying a tax that then gets rendered back to them. So Ameren, Illinois, has been surveying cities' ordinances that exempt their own facilities and sometimes other types of facilities, and has asked for a clarification in the case of our ordinance. And so that's the purpose of this ordinance.
Move to send this to council recommendation for approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion? In favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Don't hear any noes. Ayes have it. And there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.